This list is not ranked. Most of the lists on this vlog won't be. And the reason for that is because different films are meant to be felt in different ways. And those feelings are entirely subjective, unlike numbers, which are objective. There's no such thing as an objective review in the same way that there's no such thing as a subjective measurement. But what we can do is speak objectively about our subjectivity. And that's only what I ever hope to do when expressing an opinion on this vlog.
What?
All I mean to say is that you're welcome to disagree with this list, but you'd be wrong. Number 6, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
To the last, I will grapple with thee. Khan! Khan!
Perhaps you're wondering why The Wrath of Khan never appeared on your required reading list in high school. That's because the novel that it's based on is actually titled Moby Dick, even if only very loosely based. Both stories feature obsessive sociopathic captains who are hell-bent on carrying out suicidal revenge plots against the man/creature they hold responsible for their terrible lots in life.
Khan, bloodsucker.
Ahab goes after the white whale. Khan targets the Enterprise. Easy peasy. Now, I don't mean to say that Moby Dick is at all a bad novel. It's great, especially if you like chapter-long segues concerning the proper removal of the head of a whale. But Wrath of Khan is set in space, see? And everything's better when set in space. Number 5, Pride and Prejudice. This novel sucks. It sucks. It's boring, it's anticlimactic, it reads just like a diary. It's a travelogue of emotion and Regency-era etiquette, little more. I suppose there's a subtle humor at play, some good conflicts of interest between some of the characters, but these gems are stuffed between so much pomp and fluff that it took a real master of cinema to mine them out for us back in 2005. The movie is fantastic. It's condensed, it's pretty, and it makes romance exciting by focusing on love as an action rather than a feeling, which would be impossible to film anyway.
Mr. Darcy?
Miss Elizabeth? I'll be in my bunk.
Part of the problem might be the inherent limits of the writing medium. Here, go read Darcy's proposal from the book, then go watch the same scene from the film, and tell me which one gave you chills.
And those are the words of a gentleman. From the first moment I met you, your arrogance and conceit, your selfish disdain for the feelings of others, made me realize that you were the last man in the world I could ever be prevailed upon to marry.
Number 4, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
We have no normality.
Normality, right. We can talk about normality till the cows come home.
What is normal?
What's home?
What are cows?
I really kind of feel terrible putting this one on the list, because I really like Hitchhiker's Guide. It contains some of the funniest scenes, lines, and scenarios I've ever encountered in a work of fiction, written or otherwise. But taken as a whole, getting through all 5 books of the trilogy can feel like a bit of a chore. It's just a little too disjointed, a little too episodic, which isn't a surprise given that Hitchhiker's Guide was a radio show before it was a novel. It also gets a little too out there at times, a little too far away from the human experience. All I know is that my sympathy for Arthur Dent starts to wane throughout the 3rd and 5th books. But what the film did was condense the very best of those loosely connected anecdotes and boil them down into one hilarious, heartfelt tale of adventure, love, and sentient petunias. The books also sport a famously depressing conclusion, and Douglas Adams had often expressed a desire to go back and finish the series on a happier note. Blessed are we that Adams was able to pen the first draft of the screenplay before he died suddenly and tragically in 2001, and so the film is probably the closest that we'll ever get to that completed vision. And the scene with the point of view gun kills me every time.
Relax.
Why so edgy? You want to know why I'm edgy?
Of course you're edgy. Your planet's been blown up and you've been tooling around the galaxy with the guy who signed the order.
Number 3, Interview with a Vampire. This movie is awesome. It forms in my mind what is the holy trinity of vampire films. Interview with a Vampire, Nosferatu, and Blade. Whatever you could ever want from a vampire film is contained somewhere in at least one of these films. Where the movie is a lyric gothic horror told in all its grimy glory with a much needed dose of brilliant gallows humor.
Claudia, what have we told you?
Never in the house.
The book is a whiny, plotting, angsty slog. Each work contains the same basic plot and premise, but the film trims off all the fat and it spends less time letting Louis whine about everything. And even when he is whining, the film exhibits a very playful self-awareness about the whole thing.
Still whining, Louis. Have you heard enough? I've had to listen to that for centuries.
Not that I blame Anne Rice for writing an angsty novel about the life and death of a vampire child and her bitter, tortured progenitor. Rice began writing Interview with a Vampire soon after the death of her 5-year-old daughter, who died of leukemia, a cancer of the blood. Number 2. The Count of Monte Cristo. In a lot of respects, this selection could share its spot with Hitchhiker's Guide on the list. Originally published over the course of several years as a newspaper serial, The Count of Monte Cristo, in its collected form, can feel a bit like an overextended episodic chore. The story of Edmond Dantes on his multi-decade quest for revenge after being falsely imprisoned for 15 years in the Chateau d'If is compelling in its own right, but when was Alexandre Dumas ever going to wrap it up? The 2002 film did 2 things better than the book. 1. It condensed the action, combining characters, and trimming down the fat of the story, so as to produce an exceptionally cathartic revenge thriller that's over in 131 minutes. And 2. It featured Guy Pearce. I will never not watch something with Guy Pearce in it. Ta-da! Number 1. Starship Troopers. Okay, so in order to talk about this book and this movie, we need to talk about each of their creators, Robert Heinlein and Paul Verhoeven. Heinlein served in the US Navy from 1929 to 1934. After his exit from the military, he became a vocal proponent of the US nuclear weapons program, and he started writing political essays disguised as science fiction novels in order to spread his beliefs on the subject. Paul Verhoeven grew up in the Nazi-occupied Netherlands, and was routinely bombed by both Axis and Allied forces throughout World War II. Verhoeven hated Nazis just as much as Heinlein, but that's pretty much where the similarities end. You know that scene in Starship Troopers where Lieutenant Razak is telling the kids that only people who've served in the military have earned the right to vote? The right to be citizens? To participate in society? That scene is in both the book and the movie, but while Verhoeven was satirizing those opinions, Heinlein was actually expressing them. Verhoeven did well to recognize the dangerously ironic connections between Heinlein's idealized military state and the tenets of the Third Reich. But when he put Doogie Howser in an SS uniform, nobody got the joke. To this day, people watch Starship Troopers and call it a pro-Nazi, neo-jingoist propaganda machine, not realizing that that's exactly the thing that Verhoeven was criticizing. If for nothing else, go see Starship Troopers for the entertainment value, of which the novel has very little. Whatever your political beliefs, Starship Troopers the book is a snoozy lecture with a bit of cool ideas about the future of space warfare thrown in for good measure. The movie, on the other hand, is 2 hours of this.